The Holy Gospel according to Matthew. One of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I betray him to you?" They paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he began to look for an opportunity to betray him. On the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Where do you want us to make the preparations for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is near. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.'" So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, he took his place with the 12, and while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." And they became greatly distressed and began to say to him one after another, "Surely not I, Lord." He answered, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him. But woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for him not to have been born." Judas, who betrayed him, said, "Surely not I, Rabbi." He replied, "You have said so." While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to the disciples, and said, "Take, eat. This is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will never again drink of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." When they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, "You will all become deserters because of me this night. For it is written, 'I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered.' But after I am raised up, I will go ahead of you to Galilee." Peter said to him, "Though all become deserters because of you, I will never desert you." Jesus said to him, "Truly I tell you, this very night, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." Peter said to him, "Even though I must die with you, I will not deny you." And so said all the disciples. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there to pray." He took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee and began to be grieved and agitated. He said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want." Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So you could not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again he went away for the second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass from me unless I drink it, your will be done." Again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him." At once he came up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here to do." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. Suddenly, one of those with Jesus put his hand on the sword, drew it, and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen in this way?" At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you didn't arrest me. But all this has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, in whose house the scribes and the elders were gathered. But Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards in order to see how this would end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus so they might put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last, two came forward and said, "This fellow said, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days.'" The high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But Jesus was silent. Then the high priest said to him, "I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? You have now heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict?" They answered, "He deserves death." Then they spat in his face and struck him. And some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Messiah. Who is it that struck you?" Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl came to him and said, "You also were with Jesus the Galilean." But he denied it before all of them, saying, "I do not know what you are talking about." When he went out on the porch, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." Again he denied it with an oath, "I do not know the man." After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, "Certainly you are one of them, for your accent betrays you." Then he began to curse, and he swore an oath, "I do not know the man." At that moment, the cock crowed. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said, "Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conferred together against Jesus in order to bring about his death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. When Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he repented and brought back 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders. He said, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." But they said, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." Throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, "It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since they are blood money." After conferring together, they used them to buy the potter's field as a place to bury foreigners. For this reason, that field has been called the Field of Blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one on whom a price had been set, on whom some of the people of Israel had set a price, and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord commanded me. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You say so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they have against you?" But he gave no answer, not even a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Judas Barabbas. So after they gathered, Pilate said to them, "Who do you want me to release to you? Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what should I do with Jesus who is called the Messiah?" All of them said, "Let him be crucified." Then he asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water, washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." Then the people, as a whole, answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." So he released Barabbas for them. And after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man named Simon from Cyrene. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull, they offered him wine to drink, mixed with gall. And when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him. Over his head, they put a charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then two bandits were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he wants to. For he said, 'I am God's son.'" The bandits who were crucified with him also taunted him in the same way. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. About 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani." That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "This man is calling for Elijah." At once, one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it for him to drink. But the other said, "Wait, let's see whether Elijah will come and save him." Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. After his resurrection, they came out of the tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many. Now, when the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were terrified and said, "Truly, this man was God's son." Many women were also there, looking on from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee and had provided for him. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. So Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn into the rock. He then rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember what that impostor said while he was still alive. After 3 days, I will rise again. Therefore, command the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may go and steal him away and tell the people he has been raised from the dead. And the last deception would be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go make it as secure as you can." So they went with the guard and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone. The Gospel of the Lord. Sometimes we look at this story, and especially this passage that we've just read, and it seems to focus on the sufferings of Jesus. Seems to focus on the things that he went through, the humiliations, the torments. Now, of course, we want to hurry along and get right to the resurrection. Give us the good news. But there's still good news, even in everything that Jesus went through. That good news is that when we pray, we're not praying to someone who doesn't understand us. We're not praying to someone who has not suffered in the same way that we have. We're praying to someone who knows exactly what we've been through. A suffering God. That was a ridicule or what do I say, a foolishness to other religions in the world, suffering God. And yet, like Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, only the suffering God can truly help. Only the one who has suffered with us and like us can understand our needs. One of the things that he suffered so horribly was the humiliation. The humiliation. It begins with when he's before Caiaphas. And when Caiaphas says, "Tell us, are you the Son of God?" Well, Jesus says, you guys said so, but I'm telling you that from now on, you'll see me seated at the right hand of the power. And the Jewish leadership accounted that as blasphemy. And then we see Caiaphas tear his clothes. The reason he does that is because in the Jewish culture, to find someone who had died or had departed the way, they would tear their clothes in anguish. Caiaphas is saying Jesus has departed from their ways, and also acknowledging that Jesus is going to forfeit his life for it. But the humiliation really begins when it says that then they spat in his face and they struck him, and some slapped him from behind or from the side or whatever, because then they said, "Oh, prophesy to us if you're the Messiah. Who struck you? Who was it that slapped you?" Spat in the face. I got to tell you, I've been spat in the face before, and boy, oh boy, there are few things that are more infuriating than that. So Jesus does nothing. They're, they take him before Pilate, and Pilate is absolutely perplexed with Jesus. But then, trying to make good with the Jewish leadership at the time, and again, remember, when they're talking about the Jews, they're not talking about the Jewish people, they're talking about the leadership at that time. It says that Pilate says, well, it's a custom that during this festival of unleavened bread, I release a prisoner to you. So here's what I've got. I've got this guy named Jesus Barabbas, and then I've got Jesus the Messiah. Which one do you want? Funny thing is, now Jesus, which is a Greek version of the name, it's based on the Hebrew Aramaic name Yeshua. It was one of the most popular names in ancient Judea. Why? Yeshua is none other than Joshua, as the way we pronounce it now. So it's not uncommon to find many people named Jesus or Yeshua. But this guy's name, Jesus Barabbas, means Jesus, the Son of the Father. Do you want this guy, Jesus, the Son of the Father, or do you want Jesus, the Messiah? What is Barabbas except a counterfeit? And the people say, we want the counterfeit. Jesus is thinking, all I've done is heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, feed you, teach you, and you still want to choose the counterfeit. Another humiliation. It says that when Jesus is given to the soldiers, that they strip him and they put this scarlet robe on him. Then they make a crown out of thorns, and these thorns are long, an inch and a half, and they press it down into the scalp. And of course, any kind of head wound creates just unbelievable bleeding. Then they mock him. Hail, King of the Jews. Says he was scourged. In the scourging that takes place, these whips that they had were leather thongs, but in those thongs were barbs of metal and pieces of glass, so that when they lashed it into a person's back, this metal and this glass dug into the flesh, and then when they pulled it out, it tore out chunks of flesh. Prolific bleeding. And Jesus suffered all of that. Afterwards, they take him to be crucified. They came to the place of the skull, Golgotha, and they offered him this wine that was mixed with gall. It wasn't a compassionate move on their part, because what it was supposed to do was to prolong the pain. It would actually serve to like a, what's the word we want? Like a pain reliever, so that the death would actually take longer. And they put a sign over his head. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. The two bandits that were there ridiculed him. Certainly one did. And then it says that those that passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, you were going to destroy the temple and build it back in 3 days. Why don't you save yourself? If you're the Son of God, come down from the cross. All of this was humiliation upon humiliation. That's what we've suffered. In our lives, we've suffered humiliation of different sorts, of many different sorts. But then there comes a time when we see Jesus as the earthquake is going on and the stone is stones are split. And the centurion who is there and the guards who are with them, we see this mockery now turn to understanding as they go, truly, this man was the Son of God. And then after Jesus is buried, sealed up in the tomb that was made ready by Joseph of Arimathea, that the leadership again comes to Pilate and says, hey, remember, he said he was going to raise himself in 3 days. So just in case his disciples come to spirit his body away, give us something. And Pilate tells them in the very same terms what they had told Judas Iscariot. When Judas was horrified at what had happened, he wanted to give the silver pieces back, 30 pieces of silver, a month's wage. And they said, what is that to us? See to it yourself. So now, when they come to Pontius Pilate, Pilate says to them, you have your own guards. See to it yourself. Mockery has turned to fear for them. But one thing to look at is Jesus on the cross says these words that have been perplexing to ministers for a long, long time. My God, why have you forsaken me? Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. And there's been a lot of bad sermons preached about God looking down on Jesus and seeing that Jesus had taken on the sins of the world and that God couldn't bear to look on that sin and turned his back. No, that's not what's happening at all. In those days, the Psalms weren't numbered. Jesus couldn't say, hey, look at Psalm 22. They would have gone, which one is that? Rather, what they would do is simply quote the first line of the psalm. For example, if I were to say, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, you would go, oh, well, he's quoting A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. Jesus does the same thing. So when he gives that utterance, he's not saying that God has abandoned him. He's not saying that he's deserted. What he's saying is Remember that psalm that starts with the line, my God, why have you forsaken me? It's Psalm 22. And it bears remembering. So bear with me. I'm going to read it for you. Psalm 22. See how much this sounds like what Jesus was experiencing. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me, from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but find no rest. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you our ancestors trusted. They trusted, and you delivered them. To you they cried, and were saved. In you they trusted, and were not put to shame. But I am a worm, and not human, scorned by others, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They sneer at me, they shake their heads. Commit your cause to the Lord. Let him deliver. Let him rescue the one in whom he delights. Yet it was you who took me from the womb. You kept me safe on my mother's breast. On you I was cast from my birth. And since my mother bore me, you have been my God. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help. Many bulls encircle me, strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths at me like a ravening and roaring lion. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breast. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death, for dogs are all around me. A company of evildoers encircles me. They bound my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots. But you, O Lord, do not be far away. O my help, come quickly to my aid. Deliver my soul from the sword, my life from the power of the dog. Save me from the mouth of the lion. From the horns of the wild oxen you have rescued me. I will tell of your name to my brothers and sisters. In the midst of the congregation, I will praise you. You who fear the Lord, praise him. All you offspring of Jacob, glorify him. Stand in awe of him, all you offspring of Israel. For he did not despise or abhor the affliction of the afflicted. He did not hide his face from me, but cried, but heard when I cried to him. From you comes my praise in the great congregation. My vows I will pay before those who fear him. The poor shall eat and be satisfied. Those who seek him shall praise the Lord. May your hearts live forever. All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations shall worship before him. For dominion belongs to the Lord. He rules over the nations. To him indeed shall all who sleep in the earth bow down. Before him shall bow all who go down to the dust. And I shall live for him. Posterity will serve him. Future generations will be told about the Lord and proclaim his deliverance to a people yet unborn, saying, he has done it. Thanks be to God.